everyone, and welcome into this episode of the Bear Down Buzz. The Bear Down Buzz podcast. As always, myself, Eli, joined by Isaac and Joe. Fellas, rather than starting with the injury report this week, there's been a lot of aftermath with this Washington game, specifically when it comes to the coaching staff and players calling out coaches and what have you. But I wanted to start with you, Isaac, with this whole Shane Waldron situation, kind of defending his play call, the handoff in the red zone with Doug Kramer at the goal line. Kind of give me your thoughts on what you kind of thought of Shane Waldron defending that decision.
Yeah, like a lot of Bears fans have been saying, it kind of pisses me off because it's crazy for a coach to kind of double down on his take that was obviously not a good play call. And you know what's crazy to me is like Doug Kramer, like as much as Waldron was saying, like, yeah, we've practiced this situation and during practice and we've given Doug Kramer some handoffs and stuff like that. To not use your third down power back, a guy that can easily get into the end zone like Roshan Johnson, is very questionable. And it's crazy because it was like the most crucial play of the game, and you decide to hand it off to a backup center that has never, ran with the ball in the NFL before. It's crazy. And if Waldron just called a simple play where it wasn't Doug Kramer and it was Roshan or something like that, like this would have never happened. The Hail Mary would have never happened. We probably would have won the game. Um, and you know, like it's crazy how this turn of events came to be because week one, like Doug Kramer was never even like the fullback. It was Blasting Game, and then we released Blasting Game because Doug Kramer has been doing well, and we thought it could work, and it just didn't work. So for these coaches, like like I mentioned in the previous episode, I don't think these coaches are capable of taking the Bears to the Super Bowl, let alone even the playoffs with how the NFC North is playing. And that's basically my thoughts on Shane Waldron's decision to basically double down on running the ball with Doug Kramer.
So, Joe, I'll ask you the same question and kind of any thoughts on the press conferences this week, if you might have any. Your thoughts on the Shane Waldron decision to give it to Doug Kramer and his kind of stance on standing by that play call.
Yeah, I'll start. I don't love that Shane Waldron doubled down, but it did sound like he was kind of backed in the corner and like they were kind of forcing him to answer about that play, which, okay, cool. Like we want answers about that play, but if he's forced into answering a question that he doesn't want to answer, yeah, that's obviously not the answer you want to hear. I stand by that play. And I understand the thought process behind that play. But at that point in the game, you don't run that play. I mean, we said it on Monday. You just don't run that play, and I think he has to understand that in general. Like, if yeah, it could be a fine play call, but you have to be winning. It it. I mean, we don't have a soundbite because they don't um air the press conferences on Thursdays. They're just uh the media just talks to them, but we don't really know how he said it, but the the issue is he still backed it up. Like you can say you like the play call, but you could also then admit that we shouldn't have ran it at that point. He didn't do that. Um, but yeah, that is what I think of Waldron. And then other stuff that happened this week, it's all like kind of. It sounds like supposed to lose in the locker room, and it sounds like they're some. It sounds like he told the leaders on the team to not talk about stuff out of house. I'm sure everyone had already said stuff to the media about the bad the things that went wrong in that game. I don't know. It's doesn't seem like it's a good thing for the Bears right now. Um, Foos also kind of isn't taking any. I mean, he sort of took accountability yesterday, but he didn't really. Like he said he that accountability starts with me, but then he also didn't. I didn't think about this when I read the quote, but he also didn't like go into detail on what he could have been more accountable about. So like it's just a blanket statement that you sure could be more accountable, but tell us what you're being accountable about. Caleb Williams, at least when he said uh everyone needs to he said something similar. He also then went into the parts of the game Sunday that he didn't they didn't do well, like on the offense, and he gave examples of how they could get better. Flus didn't do that about himself, and he just it doesn't seem like he ever does that and ever wants to admit that he was wrong, which is an issue. I know head coaches, a lot of head coaches, some head coaches do, and head coaches don't. Dan Campbell's an example of someone who will admit when he is wrong. Um, I'm sure Andy Reid would probably too, but you don't really ever get into that situation. But last year or whenever Dan Campbell fails on a fourth down, not every time, but whenever Dan Campbell, sometimes when Campbell fails on a fourth down, he'll go in the press conference and say, "Yeah, that was my fault." Like he'll just take the blame for himself and not put it on the players, which is what Flus should have done because a lot of that stuff was on him. And not blame it on the execution because yes, the execution was bad, but the coaching is also the issue a little bit there.
And I want to add something really quick with Matt Eberflus. Um, Earlier in last episode, I was talking about how Cole Kmet was basically saying like, some guys were slacking off during practice. Like that's his. I mean, he wasn't really saying that, but he was saying that like low key. And then they asked Matt Eberflus about that. They're like, hey, what was up with Cole saying that? And then I don't know, because I think it was just like on Twitter, it was just like a text. It wasn't like a video. But he basically said like, "Oh, you have to ask Cole about that." Which kind of made me upset because instead of saying like, "Oh, I'm proud of Cole for stepping up and being a team captain, team leader," and saying that, he's basically trying to hold other guys accountable. He's kind of just like, "Oh, you go ask him about it." Like, I don't know. I don't have anything to say. Which I mean, I think he's probably a little upset that Cole's kind of outing teammates like that. But I think it's a good sign of accountability, and it's just something that the Bears need right now. We don't have a lot of it, and it's pretty obvious that, like Joe mentioned, I feel like Eberflus is kind of losing the locker room a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely when you hear Matt Eberflus kind of mention keeping things in house and not saying that directly to the media, it makes you wonder if he's worried about the integrity of the team or if he's worried about news of him losing the locker room getting into the national spotlight because that makes his seat even more hot than it is within the Chicago fan base. And once it gets out to the national media, that becomes the narrative. So it makes you wonder whether or not Eberflus is worried about the actual integrity of his locker room or if it's saving his own behind, so to speak. Uh, but hopefully we can all just move forward with this. Joe, if you had one more thing before we get into the
All I
Arizona
want
game.
to say, sorry, yeah, all I want to say is everything that the players were saying, everyone else was saying too. So like the fact that he's like you shouldn't he's telling the players you shouldn't say that out like in the public. Everyone's talking about it. What's the difference? Like just again, I got goes to the accountability thing. They're taking accountability for something that went wrong, and everyone knows it went wrong. When you can't admit that yourself, it just doesn't look good. And I know you said that, but sorry, yeah, I cut you off. But yeah, basically, just there's no point to telling your players not to say that in public when everyone is talking about it. Just it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, Eberflus is basically saying ignore this giant elephant that is in the room, walk around it, don't mention it to anybody. It's not a big deal. But the players are talking about that elephant, and everybody knows that there's an elephant there. Um, so I completely agree. But again, hopefully we can just move forward with this and get prepared for the Arizona game. Uh, and usually, as we start with the injury report, we'll get into that right now. So, Joe, if you have that injury report pulled up for the Chicago Bears, you can get into it.
Yes. So the Bears injury report, it's a long list and um it's kind of the same actually kind of the same length as it's been recently, but it's a bunch there's a lot of linemen on this list, which isn't good. Offensive lineman, that is. Crown Amagaji was a calf injury, did not practice today. Also, not yesterday, but they also didn't practice yesterday. They did a walkthrough. Uh, and here's another thing that Flu said in the press conference yesterday. It was because of injuries, which, okay, sure, that's fine. I don't know if I completely believe that, but that's what he said. Jaquan Brisker still is not uh, practicing with a concussion. I am concerned for his health because it's been 4 weeks. I hope this doesn't go on for too much longer and he can get healthy because concussions are, we've talked about it before, concussions are no joke. So uh, I'm worried about him. Uh, Tyler Gordon did not practice again with hamstring injuries. His hamstring injury. Uh, probably won't play. Probably won't play on Sunday. I'm gonna guess that Brisker won't also play on Sunday. Kevin Jenkins was limited yesterday as an estimation in the walkthrough. Then he did not practice today with a knee injury. Russian Jones did not practice either day with a knee injury. Mercedes Lewis did not practice today, but it's the veteran rest day, which he always gets Thursday. Ryan Bates, he's been limited back from IR both today and yesterday. Montez Sweat with a shin injury was uh, did not practice yesterday, which is an estimation, and then limited today. And then Larry Borum has been in full both days. So it looks like they'll activate Borum this week if someone can't go on the line and he'll step in. Though I don't know who they would cut to get that spot because they need the spot for Borum. Uh, 'Cause I don't think they can activate him unless they can. I don't know if they could do this and activate him on game day and then make enough people inactive to where he can play. I don't know if that's how that works, or you have to make space on the active roster for him. I think you have to make space on the active roster for him, which means they would have to cut somebody else. Which I mean, I don't want to speculate or anything, but I think if they have to cut somebody, it might be Dominic Robinson, which makes sense because he's been literally a healthy scratch each week this year. I don't know why we kept him on the roster after final cuts if they weren't going to play him at all. But yeah, that's the injury report. Uh, what are your thoughts on it, Isaac?
Yeah, I mean, to have all those offensive line injured when we're kind of trying to trade Nate Davis right now. So I don't know how, Poles is gonna react to that because I know Davis has a market, and several teams are interested in him, but hopefully the offensive line can get healthier by Sunday because if not, we're gonna probably see an offensive line consisting of Larry Borum at left tackle. If Ryan Bates can go, he'll probably slide in at right guard, and then they'll move over Matt Pryor to left guard. And then the returning starters, Coleman Shelton and Darnell Wright. But like Joe mentioned, I'm worried about Jaquan Brisker because usually, concussion shouldn't last that long, and it has been right now. And I do understand he has a history of concussions, so I want him to take as much time as needed, but it is concerning to say the least. And then with Kyler Gordon, those hamstring injuries can be devastating. Like, sometimes it could take just a couple weeks to heal, and sometimes it could take a couple months. And I hopefully when Kyler Gordon comes back, he's still that electrifying player that he is. But besides that, I mean, hopefully this is basically a must-win game now. Pretty much the rest of the schedule is we got to win these games, and it's gonna be hard because I was looking at this today, and it's crazy because Matt Eberflus has a record of 0 wins and 17 losses on away games on Sunday, which is crazy. We haven't won an away game on a regular Sunday with Matt Eberflus. And on the contrary, like the Bears are 3-0 at State Farm Stadium where the Cardinals play. So one of these records has to go, and hopefully it's the 0-17 one, but we'll see. So I'll toss it over to you, Eli, and on your thoughts on this.
Yeah, we've talked about it week in, week out with these two, but Brisker and Gordon are really those two that just stick out like a sore thumb to you because, you know, concussions are no joke, as we've kind of mentioned. So I'm okay with him missing as much time as needed, but he is a key part to the secondary. So obviously you'd rather have him back sooner than later. Um, with Gordon, I would love to see at the very least just a limited participation practice just to see where he's at. You don't want to risk re-aggravating a hamstring because, as you mentioned, Isaac, those can just linger and linger and linger. But if either one of those two could get a limited practice in on Friday and both of them to sit again, I would be okay with. I just want to see or hear something from those two or from this coaching staff to give us hope that they're moving in the right direction. I think there hasn't been a lot of communication with the Bears and this fan base when it comes to those two. It's just more of the same, you know, quotes from Matt Eberflus saying, "Oh, they're moving in the right direction. They're moving in the right direction." But he's shown a history of also not being very communicative when it comes to injury history with players on this Bears squad. Um, so I would hope to see something to let us know that they're moving in a positive direction. Uh, Braxton didn't practice again, as we mentioned. He's another key part to this offensive line that I hope we don't even have to deal with. Karan's probably not going to play. I don't really want to see Borum, but he's probably our best option at tackle right now with this health issue on the offensive line. Uh, Tevin's another key piece to this O line. Hopefully, we can get him back. And then a lot of people have mentioned Ryan Bates, and he has been limited the last 2 days, but he also hasn't seen any playing time this season. So, we can't really just expect him to slide into the lineup and be an instant improvement. Now, I truly believe if he's healthy, he is, but um, it's tough for him to just come in right away and be an upgrade. So, if he's healthy and he's ready to go, it should be an improvement. But it's tough just to expect him to come out uh, full blazing and be ready to go. And then, the rest of the injuries, Montez Sweat is moving in the right direction, so that's another hopeful sign for this game against Arizona on Sunday. But as we kind of get into this matchup, Joe, I know you actually wrote an article about keys to success for this matchup, and you had some pretty interesting statistics when it came to this Arizona defense and a pretty good matchup for the Bears offense. So I'll toss it to you, kind of your keys to success for this matchup against the Cardinals.
Yeah. I think the major key, I mean, this is key every week because you kind of got to be successful on third down every week. But the Bears have not been successful this year on third down, even against bad teams. But the Cardinals have the worst third down defense in the league. They have all year. Uh, they allowed 11 out of 15 conversions last week against the Dolphins. And the Dolphins had obviously varying third downs from 3rd and 5 to 3rd and 10, and they still got 11 first downs on third down. So the Bears need to not somehow, the Bears need to figure out their third down offense this week against the worst third down uh, defense in the league. Because if they can do that, then we could hope that carries over into the next 2 months, 2.5 months of the season, and the Bears can actually be successful on third down against our division opponents. Um, and then the other my other key is to guard Marvin Harrison Jr. That sounds like the smart. It sounds you know obviously you want to guard one of the best players. He hasn't really been playing that well, just or not that well, but he hasn't been playing to what many people thought he would be playing to start the year. But past 2 weeks, and especially last week, it sounds like they really found the correct way to use him, which is scary for the Bears because they put Eric Stevenson on Terry McLaurin last week, and that didn't go well. So the Bears need to figure out either double cover Marvin Harrison or put Jalen Johnson on Marvin Harrison, which I'd much rather them do Jalen Johnson thing than double cover Marvin Harrison Jr. Just because I think you put your best cornerback on the best uh receiver 9 out of 10 times, and the Bears just don't do that, which I don't understand. We talked about that on Monday, but I think that's what they need to do. And then offensively, you got to take advantage of the uh, young uh, Cardinals back seven. I know we played a bad back seven last week. We didn't do much, but these guys, the top two cornerbacks, have a year and a half combined in the NFL. Uh, between the two, one played all of last season, and the other one is a rookie. So their top two cornerbacks are very young, and we have very experienced receivers. Besides Rome, Rome's obviously a rookie, but Keenan and DJ are experienced receivers, so they should hopefully be able to take advantage of them. And the Cardinals don't really have a pass rush, so hopefully our injured line doesn't really give them a pass rush that they don't have. But that's issue that's scary for me if the they can get a pass rush even when they haven't had one really all year. Attack the cornerbacks of Arizona. I'll kick it over to you, Isaac. What do you think the Bears need to do to win this game?
Yeah, so like you mentioned on your article, Joe, I think one important thing is to get into rhythm early, because the Bears have been horrible at doing it. They've only scored 10 points combined in the first quarter of this whole season. So I would like to see, less three and outs in the first quarter, more touchdowns, more field goals, whatever we need to do. Because lately it's like, yeah, okay, the Bears, let's see. The Bears play at, for example, the Bears play at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll start watching it at like 1:15 because I know the Bears are just gonna do a couple three and outs or something like that. Joking, but I'm just saying like the Bears really need to get into rhythm because if not, this team doesn't know how to, it's hard for this team to play down in the game. And I mean, the last game against the Commanders, even when we were up, like we ended up losing that game. So that's my thing on offense. And then I agree with everything with that Joe was saying. The Cardinals have a young secondary. We need to attack that and stuff like that. On the defensive side for the Bears, I think we just need to focus on containing Kyler Murray because he could really, eat up all those extra yards that could put the Cardinals into position to score field goals or touchdowns. He could get like an easy, 5 yard rushing gain or 10 yard, 15 yard, whatever it is. And then just making sure that, Marvin Harrison doesn't have a big day because he hasn't been what we thought as fans. We didn't think that he was going to have, we thought basically he was going to have a better season than what he's having right now. And we don't want this game to be the one where he starts figuring it out. Okay, I could get, maybe he'll get like 10 plus receptions or something like that. So hopefully just to contain him. As much as I like him as a player, I hope that his big game isn't against us. And then I'll toss to you, Eli, and your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so I'm completely with you guys. It's just a matter of which defense shows up for Chicago. We saw multiple instances last week of Jaden Daniels using his mobile ability to convert on those third and long situations that the Bears put them in with his feet, and that's something that Kyler Murray's always been good at throughout his career as well. So you could make the argument on which quarterback you would take in terms of mobility. Jaden Daniels looks well on his way to becoming one of the better mobile quarterbacks in this league, but Murray's been doing it for a long time. So pick your poison. They're both great at it. But yeah, I completely agree. Contain Kyler Murray, key in on Marvin Harrison Jr., because I was thinking the exact same thing before you even said it, Isaac. That we don't want to be the team where Marvin Harrison Jr. figures it out. We were the laughing stock of the league this week. We don't want to be it again and have Marvin Harrison Jr. have a breakout day against our talented secondary, even if it is banged up. Speaking of banged up, kind of going over the Arizona Cardinals injuries, Kelvin Beachum, offensive tackle, was limited in practice on Thursday. Darius Robinson did not practice on Thursday with a calf injury. Beachum was a groin injury. Naquan Jones, defensive tackle, was limited in practice with a thigh injury. Roy Lopez, defensive tackle, was limited with an ankle injury. Jonah Williams, limited with a knee injury, offensive tackle there. And Sean Murphy Bunting, cornerback, was a full participant in practice on Thursday with a neck injury. So those are kind of some of the injuries there for Arizona. But excuse me, once again, going over kind of this matchup against Arizona. Another aspect of this is containing James Conner because he's had a good few seasons in the last few years. And kind of with the tail end in his time with Pittsburgh, he was having a pretty good year too. So he's been a pretty consistent running back throughout the last couple of years of his career. And, that's been an aspect of this Bears defense that has had some trouble throughout this season is our run defense. So he's a total threat on the ground. He's a threat in the red zone. So keeping them out of the red zone and just limiting whatever it is they do in their rushing attack, getting James Conner, slowing him down. And, I think they've used Trey Benson a bit too. So maybe limiting those two would be beneficial for this matchup against Arizona. You guys have anything else to add when it comes to this matchup against Arizona? Joe, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, I just want to touch on two things. You brought up James Conner and the Bears run defense. Yeah, the Bears' run defense played like a little bit better last week. They didn't allow any of their Commanders rushers to get over 100 yards. Um, I th- Besides Jaden Daniels, I think Robinson was the leading rusher. Uh, and he had I think like 65 yards. I mean, Eckler came like 13 yards short, but he also had that 30-yard run that didn't really matter at the end of the first half. So if he took those yards away, he only had 22 yards rushing. Uh, so yeah, I think the Bears' run defense, this is definitely going to be a challenge for them because the Cardinals definitely rely more on the run than the Commanders do. Commanders to do both. The the Cardinals are figuring out how to do both, but they're more of a running team right now. Although last week, uh, even though Connor got a bunch of carries, he got like 50s. I think it was between 50 and 60 yards rushing. But yeah, I definitely uh, focusing on that. And then the Bears cannot. We'll talk about. I'll add more on this when we get to the predictions. But the Bears cannot have this be a close game in the fourth quarter because the Cardinals have kicked a game-winning field goal 3 times this season. So this can't be a close game at the end. Bears need to be up like four, like more than 10 points with like 6 minutes or less in the fourth quarter. If not, then I don't have a good feeling the Bears will win the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's something we we want to avoid at all costs. Just make this a convincing win, if at all possible. Going over some of these stats that I've got pulled up for the Arizona Cardinals on offense. Total first downs this season 155. Third down conversions 35 of 84, which Joe, I actually believe you alluded to in your article, totals out to like 52%. Oh, excuse me, 50 of 96 for opposing teams. So that totals out to 52%. Joe, which I think you kind of mentioned in your article.
Yeah. Yeah. And for for that's their defense. And then the offensive, if you said their offense is 35 of 84, that's 41% on third downs. If that's the correct stat for their offense. I just did the
Yeah,
math.
no, you got it. I misspoke. I was trying to talk about the defense, but yeah, 35 of 84. So they haven't done a great job on third down. Fourth down this season, they've gone for it 8 times. So they are 3 of 8, which, just under, what would that be? Just under 50%, obviously, but 3 divided by 8, 37% of the time. So 3 of 8 there on fourth down. 2,700, just over 2,700 total offensive yards. And just over 1,100 yards on the ground total. So they do heavily rely on that rushing attack, as you kind of mentioned. And that's something that the Bears are going to have to be honest about. So it's going to be a big week for this rushing defense for Chicago to kind of step up and uh, be that unit that we all think they can be. So anything else for you guys when it comes to this matchup? I don't have a whole lot just because, Joe, you're kind of our resident Cardinals guy. I don't know a whole lot about this team, to be quite honest, but it seems like, just speaking in relative terms, this should be a game to where Chicago can capitalize on everything that Arizona has struggled with this season.
Yeah, I mean, the
But
only other thing
yeah,
is
go
the
ahead.
Cardinals are sorry. The only other thing is the Cardinals are getting one of the rookies back who's been hurt all year. He's a defensive lineman, but I mean it's his first game back, so uh hopefully they don't allow him to have a breakout first game. I don't feel like many defensive linemen do. I feel like they usually improve as their season goes on, but we'll see. I think he's a tackle. Uh but yeah, I think the Bears should have hopefully an easy time to move the ball in offense. We also like I said earlier, we thought that was going to happen last week and it didn't. So it could happen again this week. I think it will, but we could be wrong.
Yeah, so let me ask you guys, with this Chicago offense struggling last week, and we kind of saw it in the weeks prior, felt like they were getting into a groove. That obviously didn't happen last week. So, this defense, I won't say it's similar to Washington's because Washington did come to play, but this is another opponent to where, going into this game, we thought the Bears had a great chance to put up a lot of points on the board. So what can we do to avoid falling into that trend of playing down to our competition on offense. Who do you want to see kind of have a bounce back week when it comes to the Bears offensively? And Isaac, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, like, a lot of people would probably say Caleb Williams because he didn't play well for 3 quarters, but I really want to see Rome just get into a groove because I mean, besides the Colts game, he hasn't really had like a breakout performance. And I think this is the perfect week to get Rome into the groove because we're playing, like Joe mentioned, we're playing a really young and inexperienced Cardinal secondary. So if Waldron can just realize that and then have that game plan where it's like, okay, guys, we're gonna let's be a little bit more pass heavy today. Let's try to get Rome more involved. Let's try to get Keenan involved. Let's make sure DJ Moore gets his targets, and I mean, if that happens, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to win. And that's my thoughts. I'll toss it over to you, Joe. What about you?
So last week, and we obviously didn't see a bunch of track down routes or really much on the offense. But I would like to see them get back the check downs, whether that be Cole Kmet or DeAndre Swift or Roshan Johnson when he's in there. Any of those three guys get the check downs back in the playbook and the calls, because when we were doing that, the offense actually moved the ball and looked pretty good. Last week, it kind of just seemed like he was trying to stretch the field again, which, sure. I mean, we talked about it before that game. The Commanders' defense of secondary isn't that good, but you kind of got to earn that by giving him checkdowns to hit. And he obviously was, Caleb Williams obviously was amped up during that game. So it's not all on Waldron, but like, give him the easy stuff to hit. That's kind of why one of my keys in my article, and you guys mentioned it, was getting rhythm. You got to get in rhythm by giving him the check downs and easy stuff to hit before you take those deep shots. Like, they were doing that for 3 weeks. I mean, as it was against Carolina and Jacksonville and the Rams, but they were still doing that. They didn't look like they wanted to do that last week. So they got to do that. I think get Cole Kmet or DeAndre Swift or Roshan Johnson more targets early in the game.
Yeah.
I'll toss it over to you, Eli.
Yeah. And I think the best example that we saw from that through these first 8 weeks was in that Jacksonville game. If you remember, the Bears started out with 2 3-and-outs, which we're kind of used to so far this season. But it was those checkdowns and those easy passes that kind of got Caleb's confidence going. And he slowly turned those checkdowns into 15 to 25-yard shots in the middle of the field to Cole Kmet and whoever might have been there. Keenan Allen had a good day in Jacksonville. So it's the rhythm aspect to this I completely agree with, because that is how Caleb Williams has progressed this season, is building his confidence and making him slowly get into that rhythm. And I'm trying to articulate this the best that I can. It seems like the easier passes, as he makes them, he slowly seems to read the field better because he gets into that rhythm, and the checkdowns turn into those completions and outside the numbers and everything like that. So it just seems like the cerebral aspect to it, when you start him off with the easy stuff, he slowly seems to just get into the zone. And I think that's something that we can do this week against Arizona. So personally, I think with as many combinations as we've seen from the offensive line in the last few weeks, and it's super banged up right now, I think this is another week to where you should, move the pocket, do the RPO, get him on the bootleg, roll him out. That seems to be when he's, we can all agree that he's great in structure. That's a narrative that was spun out of him that he can't play in structure, but that's completely false. He can do it both ways, but in a pinch right now, I'd say play to that aspect of his game, roll out the pocket and get him on the move, because, we said it last week too. We weren't going against a very good defensive front, but they struggled to move that pocket, and they tried to keep him in there, and the offensive line struggled against a unit that overperformed, in my opinion. So, learn from your mistakes and do the opposite of what you did last week and try to get Caleb going. But as for a player that I kind of want to see bounce back, I agree that I do want Roma Dunze to kind of be more involved in this offense because we've all seen the clips of him just executing just a perfect move and getting into space and getting open. And, Caleb just didn't have enough time to get it there. But when those two have been on the same page, it's been great to watch. So that's something I really want to see this week. And I know we've said that, pretty much every episode for the last 2 to 3 weeks, but it's the truth. We need to get him more involved because he was a first round pick. He was a top 10 selection. And we need to utilize him like he is. And that's kind of my thoughts on what the Bears need to do offensively to kind of put this one away. But do you guys have anything else when it comes to this matchup, offensively, defensively? Special teams, again, that's something we really need to be big on moving forward as well. So we'll kind of transition into, actually, we'll start with our scoring predictions for this matchup first, and then we'll get into some other games. But um, I I truthfully believe that I don't think this Bears team is going to come out guns a blazing and kind of reestablish our confidence. I do think they'll win, but I think, if you had told me that we had played Jacksonville and then we play Arizona and we were still in that rhythm and rolling, I think this could be a game to where Chicago wins kind of like a 28-17 victory. But that wasn't the case, and we've kind of slowed down. So I think this is a game to where we're going to struggle a bit offensively. And I think this can be a game to where we win kind of a 24-20 matchup against Arizona. So I'm taking the Bears to win 24-20. And Joe, I'll toss it to you.
I don't like the closeness because they'll beat us if it's close. Because they've been doing that, but also that's a 4 point game, so it's not, at least it's not 3 points or less. If it's 3 points or less, then the Cardinals are definitely going to win. But if it's four or more likely the Bears. So with that being said, let's go 20, uh, 20 to 20, 21-17. There's my 4 points. Isaac, how about you?
It's funny, Eli, because I was literally gonna say 24-20 because I don't know, it's just gonna be like one of those games where it's gonna be close, and I don't want it to be close, like Joe mentioned, because if it's close, then Bears don't usually win those kind of games. Um, but I'm optimistic. I think the Bears can bounce back, but at the same time, this coaching staff has basically sucked the life out of me. I can't do it anymore. Like watching this Bears team, like have a really good week against a really bad opponent. I'm like, yes, like we're doing something, and then we play like a opponent where it's like, well, we could beat them, but maybe they could beat us, and then they just beat us, and we're like, oh my gosh. Um, I do think the Bears are gonna win this one. I think this is gonna be Eberflus's first win on the road on a Sunday. However, I do unfortunately feel like it's gonna be closer than what we want it to be. And I also think it's probably, even though the Cardinals have a bad defense, relatively speaking, I do think it's gonna be a lower scoring game than what we've seen. So I would say probably like 14 Bears, 10 Cardinals. Uh, and that's my my prediction.
Yeah, I disagree with that. We've kind of grown accustomed to the Bears scoring 20 plus points, but again, that was not the case last week. So I do like that. I like, what'd you say, 17-14? 17-14?
14-10.
14-10. Okay. Yeah. See, even lower. I like it. Uh, a defensive battle there. But yeah, I can get behind that. But moving on from this Bears matchup, there are some major implications for the NFC North this weekend as well. So we will start with the earlier game in the NFC North, an NFC North showdown between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. This is one of those games that the last few years these two teams have just played each other close for no reason. Um, and it's tough for me to say that Green Bay is in this one just because they have played Detroit well and Detroit has played them well. And the Matt LaFleur factor. Uh, but I am still picking Detroit to win this game just because I think the health of Jordan Love is still up in the air. And again, as I mentioned, these two teams just play each other close. But I think Detroit is just playing a different sport than everybody in the league right now. And I don't think it's going to be a total blowout, but I do think this is a game to where Detroit can win kind of a 31-21 kind of game. I think Green Bay still finds success offensively and maybe exposes some things about Detroit. Uh, Detroit has kind of struggled with their pass rush, and the Packers' offensive line has played well in the past few weeks. But I still think that Detroit has the better run game and the better passing attack right now. And again, Jordan Love's health is still up in the air. So I'm going 31-21 Detroit. Joe, I'll toss it to you. Your thoughts on Lions Packers?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the John Love injury because I was going to mention that. That's why I unmuted myself because I didn't know if you were going to mention that. But yeah, Love may not play. And I think that the Lions win this. Uh, the past like 4 years, Packers have had a really bad run defense. This year, I think it's been a little bit better, but the Lions just know how to run the ball. They can attack you on the ground, no matter who you are, it seems. So I think the Lions keep the ball out of Love or Willis's hands as much as they can, especially because if it's Willis, they're going to run the ball. And I don't know if the Lions can stop. I mean, I don't know how well the Lions are going to be able to stop the ball run with how you know good the Packers offensive line has been playing without Aiden Hutchinson or a bunch. I mean, they still have McNeil and DJ Reader who they signed this offseason, but I think it's going to be tough for them to stop the run or even maybe the pass against a decent Packers O line. That's why I think they're going to run the ball. Although running the ball usually keeps other teams off the field, but with the way the Lions run the ball, they score in like 5 or 6 plays anyways. So it doesn't really matter with how they run the ball. But I'll say Detroit 28, Green Bay 17. What about you, Isaac?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I think this is a game where, two teams play each other relatively well. It is in Lambeau Field, so, maybe the Packers would have had the advantage, but with Jordan Love, with his status in the air, I just like Eli mentioned, I think the Lions, as much as I hate to say it, they're a really good football team, and I feel like, it's gonna be one of those games where there's gonna be I don't want to say there's gonna be bad refing, but maybe there's gonna be some calls that they miss or something like that, and then Matt LaFleur's gonna get all angry. He throws his headset like he usually does, but um, yeah, I think Detroit's gonna win this one. Uh, I would probably say maybe like 27-21 Detroit, and like Eli mentioned, I feel like I think Green Bay still might expose some areas that of the Lions defense, and then I think that the Lions are gonna expose some stuff that Green Bay has to work on. So we'll see. Personally, I mean, I always root against the Packers, so hopefully the Lions win. But also for in terms of like trying to make the playoffs, it would be better if just what, Detroit, you take the NFC North, like that's fine. Make sure you beat Green Bay, Minnesota for us because we're trying to get that second spot in the NFC North and then hopefully make the playoffs. But we'll see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like it. I think we're all kind of leaning Detroit in this one, and rightfully so, because again, they've just been playing a different sport than everybody so far this season. But moving into the other NFC North matchup this weekend, at least between an AFC South opponent, Colts Vikings on Sunday Night Football. This is kind of an interesting one to me, just because of the turmoil that Indianapolis has been at the quarterback position. Joe Flacco named the starter there in Indy. Anthony Richardson benched. Still not over that Indianapolis loss. That would have been huge for the Bears to grab that one. But anyway, Sunday Night Football, those two teams, it's kind of interesting because we did see left tackle Christian Darrisaw go down for the Minnesota Vikings, but they did sign the left tackle from Jacksonville, Cam Robinson, I believe. So
Traded for.
they did trade for him. There you go. So uh, Vikings kind of plugged that spot. Not the same talent as Christian Darrisaw, obviously, but it is a decent replacement for Darnold to kind of have some consistency on that offensive front. So offensively, I don't think anything should change too much for Minnesota, but the Colts offense does look better under Joe Flacco. I'm still going to take Minnesota in this one just because I think I don't expect them to lose three straight. under Kevin O'Connell. So I'm going to take the Vikings in this one, but I don't think it's going to be a dominant win for them. I think it's going to be kind of a uh, 24 24-17 win. I know that's kind of on the nose there, but uh, I will take Minnesota in this one. Isaac, I'll toss it to you on this one. Your thoughts, Colts Vikings Sunday Night Football.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time these two teams met up in Minnesota, it was like the Vikings whiteout game. I believe the Colts were up by like a ridiculous amount at halftime. It was like 31
Yeah,
or
well,
33 to
there's
0.
33-point comeback. No, exactly
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. There you
I
go.
got it pulled up here. The final score was 36-39 Vikings. So
Yeah.
in overtime. Yeah, that was a
Mhm.
crazy one.
That was a crazy game. And you know, I mean, I'm not saying that it's gonna happen again, but I do think that, like you mentioned, Eli, I don't think Kevin O'Connell is gonna lose three in a row, especially with how the Vikings were playing pretty much like the first month and a half of the season. And as I mean, I agree. Like Joe Flacco is an upgrade over Anthony Richardson, but with the Colts, I don't know. This trend of like benching young guys that haven't played a lot in the NFL is kind of mind-boggling to me because okay, I Bryce Young, like yes, he was the number one overall pick. And I kind of understand like, there's more expectations on him. But with Anthony Richardson, like although they drafted him fourth overall, they should have known that this guy was kind of like a project type player. He wasn't gonna be like how Jaden Daniels or Caleb is where they're more NFL ready. And this guy needs more playing time. Like I don't know if the when Richardson was saying like, oh, I need a time, like I need a break to just gather my breath or whatever. I'm tired. I don't know if that played a big part in the decision to bench Anthony Richardson, but yeah, just I mean, I don't know what the Colts plan is right now. I know they are trying to compete for a playoff spot and Joe Flacco gives them a better advantage, but long term, I mean, I'm not sure, but yeah, like I was saying, I think it's gonna be a Vikings win. Probably be maybe like 24-17 Vikings. And I'll toss it over to you, Joe, and your thoughts on this game.
So this could be maybe the most volatile game of the week. Um, any game could be like this, but this seems is either going to be a shootout or both teams won't score more than 20 points. Um, so with that being said, I think I think Flacco brings something that like he brings the veteran presence that obviously Richardson lacked, and Richardson really wasn't doing anything besides running the ball. He had a hard time hitting passes. Flacco could throw the ball. I mean, that's really all he could do. Was not mobile at this point in his career. And he knows how to read the defense and throw the ball. Jonathan Taylor still really good. If no one knows, he's still really good. Um, and the Vikings defense looks to have been figured out the past 2 weeks. I think with Flacco, although he's not as good as Stafford is, um, I think Flacco continues to figure out this defense. The Colts offensive line is really good. I think they'll give Flacco enough time to dissect the defense and uh, hit, hopefully finally Pittman, because Pittman hasn't been doing anything this year. I know I have him in fantasy, but uh, Pittman, Downs, and Pierce for touchdowns and also tight ends. Their tight ends because Flacco loves his tight ends. Um, so I'll give this. I don't know. I don't want to give it to the Colts because I think that uh, Kevin O'Connell will figure it out and they'll win. But I also can see them not. So I'm going to give it to the Colts. I'm going to go high scoring though. Not low scoring. I'm going to go 35-31. This is going to be listening to that football game that I thought should have been flexed out, but then they set Richardson, and I think it's going to pay off with a good game. But Colts.
I like it. I like the bold prediction there, and we could afford a Vikings loss in this division right now because if we can get back on the right track and kind of weasel our way into there to third place and hopefully get on a roll here, that would be huge for the NFC North race right now. That game has a total at 46.5. So, it's not outlandish to think it could be up there. I think the Vikings are favored by 5.5 right now, which, I think that's a little rich, but That's the odd makers for you. So Joe takes the Colts. Me and Isaac take the Vikings in that one. It should be a fun week in the NFC North for football. But do you guys have anything else when it comes to the NFC North or the Bears matchup against the Cardinals as a whole? All right. Well, with that being said, be sure to keep track of our shorts, our TikToks, everything, everything content-wise from us. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, everything. See where we're at. Read these two guys' articles, because they do great work as usual. But with that being said, I think we're going to close it out here on this episode of the Bear Down Buzz podcast. We will see you next week, hopefully after a Bears win on Sunday. Peace out.